And I love how you were talking about the horses can be your mirrors. Could you maybe give us an example of someone you've worked with, how one went from, anxious, nervous to working with a horse to maybe fully confident? I assume that's what their end goal is, right?
Yes, yeah. It is actually not in the confidence with working with a horse, but it's confident in working with yourself.
Welcome to Connect the Dots, a podcast for hungry individuals that love to stay curious, who crave for knowledge, and have an insatiable appetite for growth. My name is Alex Lynn. I have coached incredible individuals from around the world and noticed something. Everyone has a story from which someone else can benefit. Why dabble and wait to make mistakes yourself when you can save so much time and learn from the experiences of others? In this podcast, I'll share deeply insightful conversations, acquired wisdom, and proven strategies so you can quickly achieve what you want in your business, relationship, health, and personal development.
Is there a connection even between horses and leadership? Truth is, there is. And today, Floor takes us through this thought process and shares with us tips and tools on how to become better leaders just by working with horses. She shares with us her stories of when she was a younger woman and her journey towards this successful coaching practice that she's now running. She's transforming people into wonderful and amazing leaders and tells us how horses are so congruent and are mirrors in some ways to who we really are and help us become better people and serve and show up in a very powerful way. Floor, my dear, thank you so much for joining me. It's such a pleasure to have you on my show on Connect the Dots. I'm so looking forward to your connections and your experiences with horses and oh my God. Anyway, I can go on for days about you, but let's give a brief bio about who you are and let's introduce the audience to your amazement. How's that?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited and I've been looking forward to this.
Awesome. So for those of you who are tuning in, Floor has been a sailor since her 21st birthday. She sailed around the world on square riggers and super yachts, has worked in theater and with the art department of movies in Holland. She moved to the UK in 2005 so that she could be with her husband, and together they ran a small successful business in building. And even to today, she's still doing the hands-on work as a painter and decorator. But in 2013, there was an event that Floor went through. Her mother fell ill, and she was told that she only had 6 weeks left to live. She changed within seconds from chronic depression to a mindset of, okay, I will live out the next 6 weeks as my best and loving self. Seeing this and witnessing the entire transformation, Floor was completely astonished and saw that how her mother went from a radical change so quickly. She felt so blessed and something came to her. She saw her mother live her final days as a loving, funny, and fully in control woman. Some even would say it's a sort of a miracle. This led Floor to making a choice, one that involved helping anyone who chooses to make a positive change. From this choice, an epiphany transpired and horses came into the game. Horses can be such great leaders. And today, we're going to talk about what horses teach us about self-leadership and unconditioned love and connection through equine facilitated coaching. So Floor, I'll give it away and say, how do horses help us develop self-leadership?
Well, thank you for that introduction. That was really nice and lovely because it's really nice to hear it from someone else. Horses, yes, they're amazing creatures, really. What happens with horses, they're herd animals. They're completely congruent. So like us, we can kind of fake it till we make it. And the horse doesn't. When the horse is not happy, it will show you straight away when it's not happy. So if it's not happy to follow you, then it will tell you. and that's where we can find our self-leadership and leadership in the bigger sense in the world.
Nice. And so what's your experiences with horses? I mean, how did you even get started into this, and what have they taught you?
I started as a 16-year-old. I worked on a homeopathic horse stable, and we retrained overworked horses. So they were Compris at 7 years. I don't know if you know, Compris is a high level of competition in dressage or in jumping.
Okay.
And if they were trained too quickly, they just didn't want to do the work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so they became kind of depressed, anxious, and like we do when we work too hard or we've been driven out of our comfort zone too much. And we retrained them so they could go to loving homes. Mm. And out of that process, we obviously had to really get to know the horse and feel where like a kind of a therapeutic session with the horse to bring it back to self-love, probably. And then we did that successfully quite a few times. That was brilliant. And what was the next question?
The question was, what insights or lessons have you learned in particular from your horses?
So for my horses, I was when I was on stables with lots of girls and boys and men with horses, and what I've noticed is that it was really apparent that the horses kind of looked like their owners, or the owners looked like they had little kind of characteristics through running through them, and it and then I noticed that my horse did the same. So if I was be irritated, if I came to the stables and I was irritated or was slightly angry, my horse didn't want to come to me, or she mirrored me.
Right.
This process it's well known in Germany and Holland. The equine facilitated coaching is called.
So, if I may,
yeah,
how do you even get started working with horses? Like for a person like me, I have no access to horses. Can we come to your place or something like yours and say, hey, I would like to try Equine facilitated coaching? And how do we even get started? Like what do we need?
If you would want to come to if you don't have any horse experience, you don't need any horse experience. We do everything from the ground, and it's all safe. We do it in small little groups, all one-to-one. You would work on a coaching question, and then we would have a leading rope to start off with.
Okay.
And then we would kind of get it so that you would be leading the horse without a lead rope. So even though you don't know horses, that still works.
Right. And I love how you were talking about the horses can be your mirrors.
Yes.
Right. Could you maybe give us an example of someone you've worked with, how one went from, anxious, nervous to working with a horse to maybe fully confident? I assume that's what their end goal is, right?
Yes. Yeah. It is actually not in the confidence with working with a horse, but it's confident in working with yourself. So the horse reacts to your energy. So for whatever reason we can be fearful, if we know if we go out of our comfort zone, sometimes really the magic really happens. And that's a similar process with the horse. So if we start working with a horse and we have a block and we work through that with the horse, we come on the other side with such a good feeling, practical feeling of having conquered the fear. Mm-hmm. And that's really that's a really present thing. It works like NLP. You are NLP trained, aren't you?
Yes.
So it's actually it's going into that feeling, knowing that you can do it. Finding that up to a really deep level, because otherwise the horse wouldn't follow.
Right.
So you will see it if when professional jumpers, or even when you start riding, they always say, look forward, look where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that is the reason, because the horse will follow where you're going, where you put your attention to, where you put your intention on, the horse will pick that up. The horse also picks it up like 2-3 seconds before you do.
Is that right?
Yes. So it's I'd never really believed it, but I've seen it so often that it's and it's mostly a thought. So the thought, if you think about a thought, it says it already, doesn't it? If you think about that thought would bring up a feeling or an emotion inside of you, that's where the horses reacts on it. So it doesn't actually react on thought, but the emotion that comes into your body with that.
Right.
And he picks that up slightly before you do, because your voice is always slightly behind your voice. Behind your mind, sorry. Yes.
And so in my practice as well, I've noticed that there is a progression of things or actions that happen. The thought, then comes the emotion, and then comes the action. And you're telling me that even though for us, that's a split-second reaction, the horses are faster than us. That's really amazing.
Yeah. And that's why it's such a good coach, because if we do that as coaches ourselves.
Yeah.
But the horse, and the other thing is that, sorry, I get very passionate about it. But the other thing is that is brilliant from the horse, because it's so congruent and it doesn't have a voice, and it won't go to your best friend and tells it in 5 minutes, Yeah. It's a really safe place to really kind of explore these emotions, and when do they come up, and how can I change them, and that's self-leadership.
And so tell me, this concept of self-leadership, one, I would love to know what your definition of self-leadership is. And the second part is, how does it translate from working with a horse to the workplace, or working with your family or your loved ones?
Okay. So I'll start with, we work with metaphors.
Okay.
So I think self-leadership is understanding who you are, your boundaries within that, and the connection you have with others, how you are perceived by others.
Right.
And not so much being in control of it, but being really aware of what happens when you say what, and what happens when you take control of something. Within the leadership with the horse, it's the boundaries are really really important. It's a big animal.
Mm-hmm.
But how, without talking, do you tell the horse to stop at your boundary,
right,
without touching it?
How do you do that? I would love to know more about that.
Yeah, go ahead. About
how to set your boundaries without even touching or doing anything physical to the horse. I guess what I'm seeing is you're working with some sort of energy or thought process. How do you create those boundaries between you and the horse without even touching them?
It's your energy. So if I put up my energy, it's how I show up.
Right.
It's really similar to coaching and NLP, probably how you know it. So if I show up like this, the horse is like, oh, look, she's got something to say. If I go like this, the horse probably would go, I'm not sure about that.
Right.
And with that energy, you get the horse moving.
Okay. And so how would you advise someone who's just starting off working with horses? Do you do pre-work before you actually get onto the field working with the horses? Or do you just say, okay, let's just jump right in and let's see what happens?
What do you mean specifically with coaching?
Yeah, with coaching, your approach, and how, say, for example, I wanted to start working with you, right?
Yeah.
And I would love to so do I have to bring my own horse, or can I use someone else's horse? How does that work?
We can, if we would work together, if I would come to Canada, we can use any horse in principle.
Okay.
I wouldn't use a high flying racehorse probably, especially if you're not if you're not familiar with horses. But it happens. I think there's a ranch in America, and she has, I think, 20 horses, and she gets CEOs and executives in, and she just lets them in with the 20 horses, and how to lead the horses. It is brilliant. But I wouldn't. I would get a horse, and we would go for coaching and onto a really specific topic that you have, and what emotions and what energy comes up with that. Then we would go into a setup arena with different tasks and obstacles, and you will lead the horse first of all with lead rope through that, and then after you would do it without a lead rope.
And so, okay, so we do the pre-work, then we go into an obstacle course, and then you said without the lead rope?
Yeah.
So how long does that typically take on average? I mean, could this take a week? Could this take 2 days? What kind of progress do you think, or you, in your experience, have you seen from someone go from, I guess, not so great at self-leadership to, okay, I can command, be present, show up differently in front of a horse? What's that process like, and how long does it usually take?
I think it depends on how open the person is towards this work. I've had people that had a huge insight within 10 minutes.
10 minutes?
Yes.
Holy smokes. Okay.
She had such an insight, and she changed her complete job.
Yes.
Out of that, because she just stood in her power out of it. And up to well, I think the longer you take it, if it doesn't come really quickly, it might not come. But on the other hand, I've never had anyone that hasn't had anything out of it. So even if it's a week or 2 weeks later, it's like, maybe that was that.
Gotcha.
So it's yeah.
So basically everybody goes at their own pace, but some may see results in 10 minutes, some may see it in 10 weeks. Don't know. Up to the person, right? Nice.
Right.
Nice. And so how does this translate, or how have you seen this translate from working with the horses to maybe social life, family life, work life? How does that translate into that?
For me?
For you, for people that you worked with?
How it translates into family life, I think it's the letting go of control. As in, they would do what they want to do. It has really slowed my life down. If I train the horses, there's a complete difference in between how I would train a person and train a horse, and it shouldn't be. I think so. The training process with a horse is you teach it something, and then and then you give it a few seconds to kind of really take the learning in before you move forward to the next one.
Right.
Some of the learnings are is if you keep on repeating one learning and you don't go any further, it's very beneficial to move on to something more difficult. And then the difficulty brings with it that the thing that he did before suddenly becomes much easier.
Right.
And we might see that in our own learnings too, in reality. I do, anyway.
So speaking of difficulties and, really, really pushing the envelope to the point of growth, right? Feeling discomfort. We're all about that in the coaching world, and giving challenges and really taking people to the next level of capacity and new limits. But I would love to know, in your opinion, what is the toughest part of working with horses, or even with humans?
It's the not control. You can't control them. So it's the leadership that you can be able, that they have to do it in their own time. And as soon as you push that, you can do that with people, you can do it with horses, but there's normally a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety involved within that.
Right.
And it's if you stay much more in the present and give it time to do little steps, and then sometimes there is room for huge steps. Yes.
Right. Right. And so it's those micro shifts. So there's micro insights that come in that lead up to the huge change, right? And I would love to take this opportunity to say, whoever's tuning in, it's okay to not make progress really, really fast, right? Because we all go at our own pace. And I think this is something that everybody kind of forgets at some point. You're in the rat race, you're trying to get on top, and yet you're not making any progress. And sometimes it's all right to slow down.
Yes.
Right. Nice.
What comes out of working with the horse, if we look talking about insights, it's the overthinking. So the working with the horse doesn't react over the overthinking. It just gets like, what do you want me to do? And that's where we normally get stuck.
And so in those situations, how would you handle the overthinking? And how would you maybe coach the person that you're working with to stop overthinking?
You've seen Tony Robbins. I
Yeah.
presume he does it too. He makes someone laugh. So you go out of your stuck state into a relaxing, and laughing is a relaxation. So you try to make someone laugh, or whatever it is there. Really, it's sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it's getting them out of the state of stuckness. Yeah,
right.
By doing something completely different.
I see. So I guess it's safe to say where focus goes, energy goes, right? And where that energy goes, it kind of expands and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the more focus you place on it, the more you get of what it is you're focusing on, right? And so I know prior to whatever we're talking about now, we touched on how the horses or the riders are told to look ahead, always look ahead, right? And that to me is a great way to live, to look forward and not dwell on the past. And maybe you'll be able to see things a lot more clearly and not be held back and all that, right? Wonderful, wonderful. And so
there's another one.
Yeah.
It's the jumpers. If you have the professional, if you have jumping lessons, you sometimes would want to look back if it's still all intact. And normally when riders do that, the last jump they jump falls.
No. Because they're focusing on their mistakes.
On the one behind them rather than the one in front of them.
Gotcha. And so this whole concept of leadership, self-leadership, it sounds like there's a level of respect that needs to be met, right? Either whether that be with yourself or with others. And so my question is, what kind of disrespectful behaviors would arise in these kind of situations with working with a horse, and how do you deal with those?
I think it's the frustrations and the irritations that something is not working in normal life as well, and wanting to storm away. I guess that when I was little, and when I was older as well, if you ride your horse and it doesn't connect for some reason, I was always told to get off and do a block around the stable block.
Yeah.
And then come back when you calm down. And that's really difficult. And I think that's self-leadership, but it's a really good quality to have, to be able to say, okay, let's calm down and walk around the stable block.
Right.
Or around the office block, and then
Right.
come back.
So it's that level of awareness, and preempting when you are feeling levels of disrespect or angst or anxiety. Taking something simple as a walk around the block can really clear the mind, make you feel present. Working with horses or working with people, one and the same, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful, wonderful. And so establishing leadership with your horse. What are maybe the top 3 things that you would say that you must do or you should do? There's no musts to establish that leadership role as quickly as possible.
Trust. Build up trust.
Yeah.
Then when you have to trust, there's a tendency that they will lean on you. And then it's kind of being strong enough to say, no, you can do it yourself. Step in your own power. And third is keeping that consistency.
Keeping the consistency. Wonderful. And so trust, stepping into your power, keeping the consistency. Is there maybe a pragmatic mindset that people can take on, or a tool that you give to your clients where it would help them in these situations?
Yeah, maybe it's a bit more spiritual one. It's actually being really present and trying to see yourself from above, and see if you are the leader that you want to see.
I see. So maybe dissociating yourself from the current situation, looking at it kind of from like a fly on the walls perspective, right, if you will, and really analyzing it and taking in what's going on objectively. Right. Wonderful. Wonderful. Can you tell me maybe a time where someone was going through a complete frustration, like they had no success working with the horses, and you saw that miracle, that shift, just like your mother, when she had that mindset of, I'm going to live my days fully in control and loving? Were you able to witness that while working with horses and people as well?
Yes, you witness it more than you would think, and I think that's why it makes it such wonderful work. Yes, I've seen people really stuck, and then as soon as they, for example, I have many examples. I'm just thinking about the right one. For example, there was a yoga teacher, and she was really stuck, not knowing what she was going to do, and then she decided to take herself through a yoga flow with the horse, and the horse completely, in 5 seconds, in a second, it just turned around and came with her. And so that's how the mind can work. But then I've also had, I worked with people that with their own horses, and they told themselves the story that it would not happen because the horse was in a certain way, and it didn't work. But then someone else from the audience stepped in and did it, and it did work without lead ropes. So it is a complete mindset. Yeah.
Right. I would love to know the level of accessibility this would be for anybody. Do you have to be a yoga teacher? Do you have to be a business owner? Like, who do you have to be before you come to you? If
you can come to me anytime.
Yeah.
I think you would like to want to have a look at who you are. You're not afraid of what you're going to see, or maybe you're afraid of what you want to see, but it doesn't stop you looking at yourself. And the looking at yourselves can be very uncomfortable, as we all know in certain ways, and stepping out of your comfort zone can be very uncomfortable. But if you feel like it's time for you to step out of your comfort zone, then yes, come and see me.
Right. Now that we have all this information, all these tools, all these tips, how can people step out of their comfort zone and come and find you? Like, how do they get in touch with you, Floor?
After COVID, obviously.
Yes.
And I'm just going online everywhere. So that takes some time, but there is a Facebook group that's called Horses as Mirrors. And there is a Facebook group that's called Solo Ventures. There is my website, florence.co.uk, and you can email me, and I'm sure there will be some information that you will be sending.
Yes. So for those of you who are tuning in on podcast, you can come check out the description below or on YouTube. I'm going to put all of Floor's information there, but thank you for sharing that, Floor.
Yep.
And I would love to see you again on the show. So thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. And I hope for those of you who are tuning in, if you want to work with horses, if you want to expose yourself, build that self-leadership and find a renewed self, please reach out to Floor. It's amazing stuff. I know Floor, wonderful person to work with. Wouldn't recommend anybody else, especially with working with horses. And have a wonderful day, everyone. Thanks, Floor.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
I do what I believe, and what I believe is that everyone holds a story that can help someone else. Through coaching, I'm able to lead conversations, dig deep, and elicit personal experiences that lead to eye-opening insights. If you want more of this and learn from some of the most incredible people on this planet, go to coachalexlin.com/connectthedots.